Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join his mission.
Paul, I'm hearing a little bit of passion as you share. I can sense your excitement. You're super passionate about this. Why? Let's back up a little bit here. Tell me about your story. I mean, what led you to this point that suddenly you're like, man, I got to get the gospel into every single campus, and you're so passionate about, seeing multiplicative or multiplying gospel movements in campuses.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I was a college student, my life was changed. I went to the University of Oklahoma and the Baptist Collegiate Ministry. I was at a winter conference, and so I was struggling. I was a believer before, but at that conference, Nick Ripken, speaker, and I remember just hearing about the persecuted church, and I remember hearing him say, like, never give up in freedom what others wouldn't in persecution. And I remember thinking, if these people can risk their lives to share the gospel, at least I can go risk some rejection by going down the dorm hall and sharing the gospel. Yeah. So my twin brother and we started this dorm Bible study. We called it The Spot.
The Spot.
And it was like, we had free pizza, poker tournaments, anything short of sin, and maybe some things that were just to get people to come. We knew nothing.
Dude, I would have been there. I would have taken all your cash. No, I'm just joking.
We had like 30 people, like 30 other freshman guys, 20 guys coming to this Bible study, and we were doing ministry, but we knew nothing about disciple making. So we were seeing people come to Christ. And so our director at the time sat my brother down and sat us down, and he started discipling us. He had us listen to a great message, Born to Reproduce by Dawson Trotman. And it's basically this idea of just meeting with one person, this vision of spiritual multiplication. And so, we had a lot of people coming, but then we started to disciple the guys one-on-one. And by the end of our college experience, we lived in the dorms all 4 years just so we could do ministry. We saw about 50 people come to Christ.
Wow.
We saw different Bible studies start in the dorms. But I think the thing that really God did in my heart was thinking about the reality of eternity, the urgency of eternity, thinking about my lost friends that were in the dorms. I remember as a sophomore, we were singing worship songs around the campfire and just thinking, if nothing changes, like my friends, picturing my friends, that fire represents what is their fate, is an eternity separated from God in hell. And so I just remember just weeping, just like, man, we have to do something. Like I believe it's impossible to exaggerate the urgency of eternity.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't live with that mindset so often. We don't live with eternity in our minds, in our hearts, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy to let that get into the back of your mind. But I think the best way to turn that on, of course, is scripture, prayer, keeping yourself spiritually motivated, but also I think sharing the gospel.
Oh yeah.
Like the more time you spend around with the lost, the more compassion you have for them, because you see the broken, you see that.
Yeah, so. You're totally speaking my language here. I mean, you think of the motto of Missions Pulse itself: know God's heart, join his mission. It's inevitable, right, when you sense the heart of God, to not include people in that. And as you talk, you remind me of the scripture that says, do not store up treasures on earth where rust destroys, where coronavirus comes in and takes lives. Alternate version, but store up treasures in heaven. And you think of eternity, there is nothing that you're going to take. I mean, I cannot take my phone, can't take my car, my house. I can't take this microphone in my cool studio here in Thailand. There's nothing I can take past those pearly gates besides souls. And if you think of those intangibles, I often think of C.S. Lewis. I read a lot of C.S. Lewis. He impacted my life in many ways. The Great Divorce tells the story of how he takes this bus into heaven, arrives into heaven, and thinking previously, he thought, how solid earth was and how kind of intangible or mystical or misty heaven might be, angels and clouds with harps. Right. But he stepped off the bus onto the grass and his feet were bleeding, because heaven was so much more real and palpable than he was. He was a ghost. He was a ghost on the grass of heaven, I think we forget that the intangibles are actually more solid in another dimension that all of eternity is rushing toward, the kingdom of heaven. And when we think with that eternity in mind, and souls are the only thing we can take, wow, that's a powerful imagery.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing we really try to instill in students is the eternal perspective. And so even from the beginning of kind of we're again, old school, the navigators, training objectives. So even in your disciple making, we try to think of training objectives versus lessons. So the idea there is training objectives is you're trying to instill a value rather than just go through a lesson. So we may have a lesson on eternal perspective, but we want to model it. We want to get it into their lives. You almost need to slow down more to really instill values.
That's what true discipleship is, right? It's not just a curriculum or a book or a manual that you flip through, done with chapter 1. There's our discipleship lesson, right, for today.
Totally. But so much of what discipleship that happens, even in the university context, is very classroom or even just mentorship once a week at Starbucks with coffee.
Yep.
It's not bringing them into their life. And so we realized if we teach people this we had a summer training program, and we were doing all sorts of great teaching, theology, books they were reading, verses they were memorizing. And by the end of the summer, we said, if these people are not having a daily quiet time, we've failed. Wow. We were giving them all sorts of material, but we weren't building in those basic habits, because I really believe that you never move beyond the basics. And so you're always instilling those values. And so one of the things we want to see is that urgency in evangelism. And so as a team, you can do that in a ministry, and they need to see it from me. They see me sharing vision. They see me weeping, literally just crying. We have to reach these students, casting vision to our core team. It's caught, the urgency in evangelism is more caught than taught. It's something they have to see it, in your life.
Yeah.
Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join his mission. This podcast is powered by Within Reach Global. Subscribe, watch, and listen on YouTube today. Visit missionspulse.com.